close out a couple of things I have here.
Perfect. And we are recording, so whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited to have you join us on this conversation today. Chemistry faculty, I understand. My name is Jamilyn Penn, and I am the Director of Transfer Education here at the State Board. And so I work very closely with the rest of the directors in the education side of the house here. And Jen and I work closely together just because I have an affinity for some of the things that she talks about around instructional practices and pedagogy. Today, I am excited about having this conversation with you. I'm a little bit outside of my comfort zone because I come from instruction from the English faculty ranks, but that's okay. I think that pedagogy is pedagogy and good teaching practices, we can all align accordingly. One of the things, and I talked with Jen about this, is that I would like to take some time today to, I want to divide the conversation up today, and I want to talk first about your area. So specifically around chemistry, the instructional practices, the pedagogy that you are considering, the challenges that you may be having, particularly as you lift your courses from the face-to-face into virtual. And when I talk about those challenges or questions that you may have, we want to talk both about the topic of chemistry, which I think you all are experts, but also the lab component, so the didactic and the lab portion of it as well. So that's the first half of the meeting, and we'll go through that and talk about what questions and current concerns you have. I think Jen is manning the chat, and we'll do that for about half an hour. Then in the second half an hour, or give or take a few minutes, I'd like to talk to you about engaging your students and the challenges that you're having, the strategies that you may or consider as we're moving into the virtual environment. So hello, and here we go. So my first question to you around your work, and as we are very much challenged by this COVID-19 pandemic that we're having, my questions is, what questions do you have around teaching chemistry online, whether that be didactic and or in the lab environment, and how can we help you in this capacity?
King 5 is working to bring you the facts of the coronavirus outbreak.
So I see that folks have been typing into the chat, and maybe to get us started, if someone doesn't mind just reading, I think maybe if it's okay, if we could start with a comment from Marie Dunn. Marie, thank you. She wrote, "Lab, this is a huge loss."
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I sort of wanted to just address that. In one of the lifeboat strategies seminars, Bryce Battisti was just talking about just it's important for all of us to kind of acknowledge the loss that we feel. And so I just wanted to kind of honor that statement first. And I guess I was also wondering if folks who are typing in, if they would like to speak their comment as well. And you will have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry, I've muted everyone.
Okay. So is there anyone, I mean, we are all, in fact, and then we can talk about this at the state board perspective, from the state board, really working with colleges and with leadership and with faculty to help them to understand, that lab component. We are all in this arena of making sure that we are acknowledging the need for and practicing social distancing and what that looks like and how we move forward. There are very few programs, if any at all, that are still saying that they're running labs because it goes against the grain of all that we need to do. So what are you doing to prepare yourself for this move? Is there anyone willing to share or to say, I just don't know how to go about doing this?
So Jamilyn, it looks like Sorry, and to everyone, I apologize. Sometimes I get a little bit overwhelmed by all the stuff in the chat, and I'm normally a fast processor, but due to kind of stress, I'm not a super fast processor these days. So I think maybe one question, Jamilyn, that I'm seeing here in the chat, and is just some general concerns about labs, and I think maybe I'll just read them, and then we can just sort of start to address them. So.
Okay.
With labs, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. This is from Allie Snow, but we have a very limited budget, as do students. So I think that's one thing that is coming up. Another issue that I'm seeing come up is finding something interactive as well as properly challenging. And I think just to add to that, organic chemistry labs seem to be a major issue of concern. I'm also, Julie Nelson wrote, I have concerns about the labs, keeping students engaged in online chemistry. How do we keep them? It's hard enough face-to-face.
Okay, let's pause there for a second because there's quite a few
Jamilyn.
things that have come up. So again, I'm the facilitator here. Again, not having the definitive answers, particularly around chemistry. So I'm going to ask that question. Allie, you're indicating what resources are available, particularly for moving from that face-to-face to online, and then additionally around labs. What are you using? Is there anyone there who says, explain to us what you are currently using and how you have decided to modify, accommodate, etc.? Is there anyone that could share, please?
I will say that I found the EDU web labs, which I included a link for all the labs that they have in the chat. They have free access to everything right now, and I have found a lab, a virtual lab to replace all of my 121s and most of my 162s. And my colleague is teaching 163, and she found several that were very useful to her as well. It also has biology labs and earth sciences and things like that. And it is, I guess, as useful of a virtual environment as you can get. The first thing you have to do is put your goggles on. They have the option to collect data. I'm making my students just write their notes down in a notebook. And then I have a report that they have to write. And then they actually have to file their results. So it kind of creates a grading key for me to see how close they were with their calculations and things like that. But a very good website with many, many chemistry labs. And some of them are, well, they call them advanced, but that's more like the regular Gen Chem series. I don't think there's any OChem on there.
Okay, can you tell us who's speaking, please? I didn't catch your name and where you're located.
Oh yeah, I'm Emily Sprafka. I'm at Centralia College.
Okay, Emily, and one other question for you. There was someone who asked for you to repeat the name of that resource.
eduweblabs.com. I posted a link to it. It looks like Linda has also posted the link, reposted it anyway, since it's further back up. Okay, and is there a cost or an expense to the college? There is no cost currently. All you have to do is contact the director of the website, and he opened it up for everyone to use. You just have to create a login for students. Like they use their name and login number, and then the instructor's last name, and like come up with a class password. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, oh no, I was just going to say I really appreciate that, and I can speak to the conversations that we're having around the 263, so the Organic Chemistry 3.
Before you go forward, tell us who you are and where you're located. Yes. And I ask that you do that because you can have that connectivity amongst yourselves, amongst your peers. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I'm Allie Snow at Pierce College, the Puyallup campus. So we had a department meeting yesterday just talking about how the heck we're going to figure out doing labs. And one thing that we were talking about is, I think, something that came up in the chat with evaluating whether, like, our current labs, whether we're really meeting the objectives, and how this really may be an opportunity to focus on things that we don't focus on as much, such as like the student scientific writing or information literacy and finding good sources. With my 263 class, usually I do a research project, and there's a lot of that, you know, obviously they can't get into the lab and do the research, but there's a lot of planning aspect that's part of that we can, you know, go pretty heavily into that. As far as actual lab experience, though, we're kind of floundering, especially now that we've been told, one of my colleagues reached out and we were told that there is basically no possibility that any of us will be allowed in to do any lab work ourselves where we could record our own videos. And, you know, that's what we were kind of hoping for, but it looks like that's no longer a possibility.
Okay. And that is very much the reality that we're in. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And I'm going to, I see there that the chat is going crazy, Jen.
I know, so, I'm like, okay.
So I'm going to pause and say this first and foremost, that your chats can be saved. And before we close out, we'll make sure, actually, I'll say it right now. If you're looking on your screen down towards the chat box, there are 3 dots there. If you click on those dots, down on the bottom right-hand side, there's another box that says more, and that's where you can save the chat, okay? Because there's a lot of great information that's flowing back and forth here.
And just jumping off that too, Jamilyn, so we are recording this session, and I will send everyone a link to the recording, a link to the chat. And also, I'm just wondering too, as we begin to kind of curate resources, the microbiology faculty created a Canvas shell, and I am happy to create an open Canvas shell, and I can add all of you to it as teachers, so people could actually start sharing these things, because I think these are some great resources. There are some questions about accessibility using Flash, and people using phones and things. Jamilyn, I do also, as the facilitator, I just want to share 2 suggestions that I think are kind of important. Like, how are people using this as an opportunity to revisit the core outcomes and make sure, Thomas had a really great comment, Tomaso, is this actually an opportunity for us to critically revisit the true objectives of our lab curriculum and whether the existing labs are actually meeting these objectives? And Ali, you spoke to this as well. And then also, I think there's a request from the chat that I think is important, which is, if folks who have been teaching online, could you possibly identify yourselves? So if you have been teaching chemistry online, if you could maybe write into the chat or speak. And I think that would also be good to see who's brand new. And okay, so Rick Morgan has been teaching chemistry online for 5 years. So Jamilyn, does that seem like a good thing?
It does.
Okay,
thank you.
cool.
And I really appreciate that, because trying to keep up with, we did this yesterday, day before yesterday, trying to keep up with the chat and to facilitate is very challenging. So I also saw a question that said, who's brand new to teaching chemistry online? So what I'll do at this moment is I'd like to bring Rick forward and ask that question. Given that you have 5 years under your belt teaching online, I know that there's some people that are brand new. So what can you explain in 2 contexts? Number 1, the didactic, Rick, and then also, excuse me, that lab, virtual lab. Will you please share?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sending you a link to my online virtual labs now that I've been using for some time. They were developed originally at the University of Oregon. They're now with a company in Australia called Smart Sparrow, and they're virtual labs. They let you make mistakes. They let you have different errors and things, and each student gets randomized values for their measurements and for their different samples, and they can take the labs over again and learn if they like, which is great. About meeting the course sample and about understanding, I haven't really revisited that in a while. to be fair. And but I find that it works well. It didn't at first. I became, I will be honest and say I've become more of a computer fixer and a project manager than a chemistry teacher that I like. Because the bulk, I'd say 75% of my questions are, my computer doesn't work, how do I update it?
From your students?
Yeah, exactly. That's what the questions I get are something like that. Or my friend borrowed my computer, I want to log into another one, will my stuff transfer? Those are the types of questions I end up answering more than chemistry questions. I've also learned what kind of questions I'll be asked with respect to chemistry questions. I sort of categorize them and catalog them. And so they become a little watch video that I make. I have my class broken into several, by week, by chapter of the book. And so I have little lessons I've recorded of myself with a pencil and a pen, not a pen, but like a tablet, going over and reviewing sample problems. And I end up just pointing them to rewatch those videos that I've already created. And the last thing is I created several stock videos of me using a calculator, a TI-89 calculator on the screen. I bought the emulator to show them how to do things like convert units, manage significant figures, and things like that. So as I get better and better at this, it ends up having more and more canned responses, which in some ways is good, in some ways is bad. But I've also learned that you have to prompt your students to become friends with each other early, at least I do, because they'll start to get to know each other about 7 or 8 if you don't force them to interact in a discussion group. Whereas if they were in a real in-person class, that they would start finding friends and communicating with people right away, but it takes a lot longer for them to find their group, I would say.
Wow. That's all of that is very valuable information. So what I'm hearing is that given that you've taught in this environment or in this manner for some time, that you understand that you're already ahead of some of the questions and concerns that come up, that technology becomes a really big thing as far as students are concerned, that you're teaching them how to use certain tools and resources, particularly around that calculator ahead of time, and that you are working to facilitate their interaction peer-to-peer on a consistent basis.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, that's all wonderful. Rick, thank you. Appreciate it. They have your name. They know where you're located.
Great.
I'm going to pull back and ask, is there someone else who has been teaching in the online environment for some time?
Jamilyn, I see Tara from Tara Golden at PCC in Clark, and also Kaylin Owens at North. So I'm wondering if possibly those two women might be willing to share.
Sure. It was Tara, and what was the other name?
Tara and Kaylin Owens.
Okay.
And of course, anyone else. Oh, hi, Kaylin.
Hello.
Hi, Kaylin. Yeah, so first of all, I'll start off by saying I have not done the lab portion online. So I know other people can speak to that and have been doing that for a long time. And so what I can speak to is sort of the content piece of it. And it's not that different from what we just heard. Basically, I try to mimic what I do in a classroom with my 139 class, a prep course, where I create videos around the content that I integrate my activity sheet. So there's always, after an introduction of an idea, I have the students pause and they have their activity sheet there. And then so they go through that. And after a certain amount of time, we finish an activity sheet. It might be that might take a week, let's say, of watching different videos and filling out their activity sheet. Then they have to upload that so that I can monitor their progress on viewing the videos. And that's my way of monitoring that. I have not played so much with putting them into groups because it causes conflict with students' schedules and things like that. I'm going to play with that this quarter, though, where I'm actually teaching one of my face-to-face classes using these same materials. And so I'll probably be putting them into breakout rooms to do that activity sheet work. Anyway, I'm playing around with that. I also, in our prep course for Gen Chem, we use a couple of Excel assignments that are pre-lab, or kind of getting them ready for the lab the general chemistry lab. We also have what we call scientific literature assignments. We're teaching them how to read the scientific literature, getting ready for our CURE program in our Gen Chem, where they're doing sort of small research projects in Gen Chem. So we're kind of prepping them for that in our prep course. So we have activities built that kind of mimic a pre-lab sort of program in the prep course. So that's a lot. And then of course there's things like discussions and other assignments that we use, online homework. So all combined into modules for on a weekly basis. I think that's what the previous speaker stated, that this is all kind of modular based and by week. So that's that. And then for this quarter, we're also looking at North. For some of our sections, we're gonna investigate using kits. So for 121, we are designing our lab program around kits, and we're putting all the students in every section in one lab Canvas shell, and going to facilitate the lab with an instructor and a couple of TAs, going to facilitate use of kits. That's not across our entire chemistry program. That's for some sections. We're doing all of 121, one section of 131, one section of 161, and one section of 162. So it's a bit of an experiment for us. We've not used the kits before, but I'm excited. We've got the materials now, and we're building out that Canvas shell for 121.
Is it Kaylin? Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Kaylin, my question to you regarding, you said kits, KITS, correct?
Yes.
How are the students getting access to those kits?
So we are fortunate to have somewhat of a budget. So for this quarter, and probably this quarter only, although we haven't looked forward into the future, our institution is going to pay for the lab kits to be mailed to the students. So we're working with Carolina. There are other companies, lots of other companies that make kits. Carolina just happened to be the company that got back to us really quickly and is able to logistically deliver what we need in time. So I can't say we've done like an exhaustive search for the best company to go with. We're going with what is available now. Mm-hmm. And so we are working to, basically we've picked which kits we want. We're working to get the Canvas shell up. And then the students will be giving us their address, and the company has agreed. I think this is above and beyond what they normally do, but they have agreed to take an address list from us and mail the kits directly to students.
And this is part of their student fees, and so that was a bit of pre-planning that had to be put into place. So that's a resource that would most definitely benefit those of us if we are continuing to move forward in the manner that we are right now. That was some planning that was done. I appreciate your feedback. I heard some really great things. It's not too much different than what we have already done as far as the face-to-face, but the nuances of making sure that you're using modules, that you're preparing. Again, there's that interaction with students and having them work in their groups. And then you have this kind of pilot-ish kind of thing going on with kids. Yeah. Thank you for that. I noticed that there was someone who said, I missed it, it's going by too fast. There was something about geo resources and kits. There's a lot of information about kits. I'm going to move on, a lot of it in the chat. So make sure that you realize that this session is recorded and that you can also record your chats. And I'd like to hear from one other person in particular before we go on to say, I still haven't heard this. That's coming for this side. But I still want to hear from someone else who has some background in this. And I think is it Tara or Tara? Can you speak?
Yeah, Tara, or it also looks like Kathleen Kerrigan.
Kathleen or Tara, what do you have to add that has not perhaps already been stated, or to reinforce what has been stated?
Well, I just wanted to say that we developed our classes a long time ago with lots of people working on it. So
okay, hold on. Tell us where you're from.
Kathy Kerrigan from Portland Community College, and we've been running online GOB with lab kits through Hands-On Labs for 12 years. And I worked really closely with the original owner to develop the OB labs to work well for our students. So I really like them, obviously. They're now also owned by, there's a company that now bought out them as well as eScience and owns both companies together now. But having said that, to try to go to lab kits on short notice is almost, I think it's really difficult. And I think it just understand that this took us a long time with a lot of people participating, editing, fixing, reviewing, and you guys must all be totally overwhelmed right now. So find something. I like the idea of an online situation with videos to work for a term. That's cheap, and you can come up with Google Docs for students to do their lab reports. So I just think it's really, really difficult to just boom, starting to have a perfect lab and using kits for everyone. It's really hard, but I'm willing to help anybody who wants to. Just contact me. I'll put my email in here, but you know how to do it through WCCTA anyway.
Yeah, I appreciate that, the timeliness of it all and being able to do it on in this moment. That's really challenging. So I appreciate that feedback that you gave. I'm sorry, I spoke over someone.
Oh, no, Jamilyn, you're doing great. And I'm sorry, this is Jen. I guess if I could just bridge for just one moment, I wanted to say thank you so much to, and I'm so sorry, I just to Kathleen.
Kaylin, Rick.
Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you so much. And one thing that I'm also hearing, I'm just thinking about kind of next steps for the group, because as Jamilyn and I discussed, like we know that we can't solve all the problems, in a 1-hour meeting. And so one thing I did want to ask is, I'm seeing a theme here where people are asking if we can work together to create some very simple labs. Just being sensitive to Kathleen's point about, no one expects you to build a perfect chemistry course overnight. And that's why we've been doing these lifeboat strategies sessions. And so I guess my question to the group is, I'm seeing a couple different solutions. One is that we could organize a smaller group to work with Kathleen, if Kathleen is willing, to kind of think about how to adapt what they've already created for people who are interested. Another option would be for folks who have taught online, like Kayleen, to share their course in a lifeboat session, just so people have a chance to kind of get under the hood and ask some questions. And a third question is, like Lee and Natalie and a few other people are asking if we could build something, Allie, if we could build something together. I would be happy to facilitate a group that wants to get together to build some things together that could be used, that are that don't require a lot of cost, are low bandwidth, that kind of are designed for the times. So I'm going to stop talking and just ask if any of those ideas sound interesting to folks for next steps.
Thank you, Jen. Oh my goodness. Yes. I think that's great. So one of the things that came up, again, this is with microbiology, but I want to share something that I heard the other day with the team that met together for microbiology. Their discovery that many of their students were also working, they're at home, they're trying to do their lab experiments and assignments there at home. And so one person stepped forward and said that they discovered that the kids wanted to engage, because many of them are parents, and that their kids were also excited to see what mom, dad, sister, brother, cousin were learning. And so you might take into consideration, hey, listen, if I'm developing labs and it can be something, it could be a family affair. We want to make sure, not that that's a requirement, but it just happened to be an outcome of something that someone was saying that they noticed and that they had heard. So I shared that with you as well. Yeah, exactly. Students have no childcare, so the kids are going to be there while you're talking about the experiment, and they'll be there when their parents are engaged in the experiment. So I just thought that was an interesting nuance. I'm going to pause one more time and ask, there's been a lot of good information, both I'm looking at the chat now, going through the chat, and also those who've worked in, who've already done this before. For those of you who are still like, I still didn't get my question answered, or I'd like to see if anyone has any feedback. What questions still do you have? And I'd like for you to come to the mic if at all possible.
Yeah, and Jamilyn, if just while we're waiting for people to come to the mic, I do want to say to the folks who are starting next week, one of the reasons we wanted to have these lifeboat strategy sessions is because really all you need to do is get that first week up. And there are things, you know, and we can figure out sort of like longer term solutions later. But I do think like looking at setting up, like letting go of maybe a lot of your content that first week, I'm just going to propose that. And maybe doing some work with your students around getting to know you, getting to know them, addressing their concerns about COVID-19, doing a technology survey. So I guess I just wanted to say for folks who are, I'm just sensing there's some panic and overwhelm in the chat. And I just wanted to give you permission to maybe just think about getting that first week done. And then we can, as a group, work on some longer term solutions.
Yeah, very much. We want to focus on more short term in the here and now to get you going, up and going and started. And we will be here as a support system. And I love the idea of that group coming together to plan and to develop. But right now, we want you to have the essential tools to help you step into that first week or so. And I will say this for some of you who are very much veteran instructors and you know how to do this with your eyes closed, I want you to go back, take a step back to what it felt like and how you had to step into that for the very first year of teaching. This is not going to be easy for some of us. You'll need to pace yourself, but it is doable. And we have some tools and resources that we're sharing with one another and that we will continue to do. Okay. So is there anyone that has a burning question that they would like to ask or information that they would like to share? We're coming up into about half an hour of our conversation here.
I have something I found that's really useful that I'd like to share.
Is this Sarah?
Yeah, this is Sarah from Walla Walla Community College.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I was kind of hesitant to look at the OpenStax textbook. I'm not really sure why, but this new situation kind of forced me to evaluate it. And the one thing that I really like is it would be useful for the Gen Chem sequence or GOB. And not necessarily that you have to use the textbooks, although you could use certain sections or chapters to supplement, but they do have Canvas courses pre-built in the Commons, and you can import those directly into your course, and they're set up for online instruction. So it has a lot of that information already built into it that you might not even think about needing for your course. So I think it would be useful for anyone who's new to online and not really sure what they need to put in their shell or how to set up their shell. If you just import it, certainly you can delete what you don't want to use, but I found a lot of the stuff that was already pre-built to be really helpful for me. It made it go a lot faster.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Yeah. Anyone else? I'm going to shift the conversation in just a bit and talk a little bit more about engaging students more. And I think that the conversation that Jen brought up around bringing together our small group and developing some longer term tools and resources and strategies will be helpful as it is applicable to teaching chemistry, the didactic, and the lab in the virtual environment. So that is coming. Okay. So I want to shift our conversation for just a little bit here and add some information. What I'll share with you is that I, prior to coming to the state board, was at Lake Washington Institute of Technology. And as you may know from the news in particular, that Lake Washington was one of the first colleges in our system that had to shut down and close. And they kind of are about 2.5 weeks ahead of the rest of the system as far as, you know, what we're going through here. At Lake Washington, I was Dean of Health Sciences, and involved in all of the pieces and parts that are involved with allied health and nursing and etc. But just as a campus community, one of the things that Lake Washington has embraced is this concept of 4 connections and how to connect with students, some of the core things that will be essential. So I'd like to shift the conversation a bit from the instructor pedagogical or pedagogy aspect of it, from how do I do the didactic and how do I do the lab aspect of it, because those are, we're going to get that to you, and talk a little bit more about connecting students and reaching out with them. And so is there anyone that's familiar with 4 connections? You can just type in yes here, because I'm going to share some of that information and then ask, how are you planning on? Okay, I see Wendy and Nazanin and a few others coming through. So I'll share this and then I'll pause and ask, what strategies are you using? What are your short-term and or long-term wise plans? So 4 Connections comes out of Odessa College, and they've done some really good research around what are the indicators of student success. And the number one indicator of student success, based on their practices and also research that they've done, is the instructor's relationship with their student. Now, that doesn't talk directly about the subject area. That's relationship, building a relationship. And the second indicator is what you guys have already talked about a little bit, is that peer-to-peer contact. So given that those are the primary indicators, and this is stuff that they've talked about at their college, they put into practice, but it's also a really research-based practice, and even Achieving the Dream has picked it up. There are 4 core tenets of 4 Connections. I'll tell you what they are, and then I want to talk a little bit about how you are planning on helping students to be successful. Again, taking a look at those indicators, the instructor's relationship and peer-to-peer contact. So the first tenet of this is interact with students by name. So the main thing is that students understand that their faculty instructors know who they are and that they know their names and that they are interacting consistently in doing so. The second is checking in regularly and supporting students wherever they happen to be. And I want you to really consider that in this virtual environment that we're in, and also in relation to what is happening with COVID-19. The third is scheduling one-on-one meetings with students. That is part of the 4 Connections. And then the fourth is practice paradox. And what that essentially means is setting high expectations and also having a high level of support, and really clearly establishing your course to the extent that you can, having it very structured, that you have commitment for high expectations, and that you're also being flexible where it is reasonable to do so. So these are the practices around 4 Connections and engaging students. And so I'd like to have a little bit of conversation around this. What have you thought about as you're moving your classes from face-to-face to this virtual environment? What successes, those of you who have already, some of you have mentioned them, what successes have you had? But we're also interested in finding out what challenges people anticipate or give you pause or concern.
Jamilyn, it looks like Nazanin Rupinder. Yes, Nazanin. Thank you, Nazanin. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, so Nazanin Rupinder, I'm at Seattle Central. So something that I've been employing now for a couple of years, even in my face-to-face classes, based on the 4 Connections, is an online check-in system. Because as you mentioned, the 4 Connections says that you should have student meetings with your students, all of them. And I did the math on that, and just time-wise, sometimes that's not possible. So what I did was move this online, and I have them essentially complete 3 check-ins with me throughout the quarter. where I ask them a couple of questions that are supposed to, facilitate some sort of guided discussion that I can then respond to online. And so the first check-in that they do for me is just for them to introduce themselves to me. I ask them what brings you to Seattle Central and what their educational and career goals are and why those are important to them. I ask them what are they most excited about for this class or the education in general. And do you have any worries or concerns about moving forward in this course? And then the fourth question is always anything else you'd like me to know about. So that's the first check-in. The second one, so this would be somewhere midway throughout the quarter. They've usually taken at least 1 or 2 exams by this point. I asked them to identify a success, identify one thing that's been a challenge, what strategies they could employ to address that challenge, and again, anything else they'd like me to know about. And then the last check-in is at the end of the quarter, and I have them reflect on their progress, what has been their proudest accomplishment. And then the second one is sort of, I used to think, but now I know, what misconception did you hold at the beginning of the quarter? And what do you know about that now? And it doesn't have to be chemistry related. The third one is sort of out of the productive persistence framework, where I ask them to pass on any advice to a future student. And once again, anything they'd like me to know about. So this has been really, really helpful because students really open up during that. I always leave space for them to open up. I learn so much about what's going on with them, what their situation is at home and whatnot, which allows me to, engage with them on a deeper level and help them be more successful in my class. And, some students kind of just write one sentence and they don't want to share that much about themselves, and that's fine too. But it's been really useful and effective use of my time and an effective use of their time as well, so they don't have to come into my office either to do that.
And in this moment, they cannot come directly into your office. Exactly. So that's beautiful. Is it Nazanin? Am I pronouncing? Yeah. Yes, Nazanin. Thank you. And I saw that there were a lot of kudos going across with Allie. I saw that as well. What you've said is paramount, and I want you to all take into consideration this as well. Those connections are, sometimes you're going to be, especially in this day and age, the only outside connection that they have in this learning environment, in an educational environment. They may be only taking your class, and so you are the sole connector for them to the institution where you are. But here's the other thing. I want to make sure that in light of all that's happening in this world right now and in our communities, you also need to be prepared for what they will bring forth to you. And so I encourage you to make sure that you understand how to access and be prepared to provide to students who come up with things like, I'm not sure how I'm going to pay for. I'm really very stressed out about, and they fill in the blank. I don't know how I'm going to be able to continue in the class because I cannot afford. I'm overwhelmed. What tools and resources will you have in your backpacks or at your disposal that maybe you think, this is overwhelming for me, I need support from other individuals on my campus, perhaps your student services, if you have counselors that are really available, because those things may potentially come up with some of your students. Okay? Anyone else like to share? Allie, I see, and I'm not seeing them because I was listening and engaging. I see people keep coming across and saying, yes, yes. Is there anything in particular that you'd like to come forward to the mic to say?
Yeah, this is my first time trying the whole thing with the discussion boards, since I'm totally new to teaching online. But I thought that would be a nice way to, maybe try to facilitate building community in an online class. And I've seen a lot of other people doing stuff like that. As far as the weekly check-ins, they are a huge workload. it takes, I don't know, I make the effort to read and comment on every single one every single week, and it takes a lot of time, and there's no getting around that. But I found the payoff to be enormous. What students share with me has been amazing, what they trust me with, and also I've been able to connect them like with counseling services. And so I would echo what was said earlier, that we have to be prepared for what they're going to share with us if we're going to open ourselves to that sort of thing, because they will share a lot. But I think that that's important, and I think it's just a way of keeping it human. So yeah, first, it is a big workload and there's no getting around it. But in my opinion, it is one of the very best things I've ever done in terms of teaching and connecting with my students and helping them feel like I want them to succeed and I am their cheerleader.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And so what that demonstrates is a welcoming environment. Many of us talk about making sure that our students feel comfortable and welcome in our brick and mortar classroom environments, but this is a way that what both of these instructors have shared is how to do that in that virtual environment. The checking in, the knowing the students' names, the follow-up and following through, the connecting them with their peers, all of that is essential, and it helps to bring in that portion of what we've talked about making it a welcome environment. My goodness, I'm getting tongue-tied here. I'm going to pause here, and this is a Jamilyn to Jen kind of conversation. Jen, although a lot of folks raised their hands or said yes when it came to For Connections in particular, I think that we might also add, if we haven't done so already, a link that would outline that information and clarify it a little bit more. I have a PowerPoint, so we could do it that way, or the two of us can talk more about that offline.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just say really quickly that, just bridging with what you just said. So I think maybe what this group needs is a open chemistry Canvas shell for y'all, and and so there's some great questions. So I actually just created one and I just put the link in. So if you want to be added to that, it actually is easier for me if you want to be added to it, if you just type your email into the chat and I will add you right away. And I also have a list of the chem faculty. So then, Jamilyn, I think we could upload some of those For Connections resources. And then also some of the people who have contributed such brilliant insights can start to share.
Sure.
And I've also posted a link into the chat with a survey link. I'll repost it in a sec. And so some of you have already started filling that out, and there's some great suggestions for what the Canvas shell could do in there too.
Perfect. Perfect. So pause for a moment. Let's all take a deep breath, because there's been some amazing information that you have shared here.
I'm taking a deep breath. I'm modeling.
Yeah. Thank you. And so my question is, and we have maybe, I don't know, maybe about 12 more minutes before we need to close things out here. What haven't we discussed that you would like to discuss? Is there something that we haven't touched upon just yet that you would like to say, Jen and Jamilyn, can we get resources or ideas or conversation about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a quick question about assessment. I had looked into getting the school to purchase a license for a lockdown browser for Canvas, but that apparently only works with Canvas. So now the school is looking into getting HonorLock, which I'm wondering if any of you have experience with that.
I can tell you from the state board perspective that we do have a contract with HonorLock, and at your colleges, and I'm not sure who your contact person is at your institution, but each institution in the system has been told how many, I don't want to say licenses, but what their bandwidth is for how many HonorLock systems they can use per college. I will send that information to Jen so that she can distribute it to this group. but we are in fact promoting honor log for the 34 college system. That's what I have to share. Anyone with direct experience, please share also. Yes. So what I will do is I'll follow up accordingly. And I do see the comment that lockdown browser doesn't work, doesn't stop people using their phone browser, and that is true. But we'll get that information to you soon. Okay, I'll follow up in that capacity.
Yeah, and I can post that to the Canvas shell.
Yeah.
I am wondering if I could just bridge off that, and then if people don't want to talk about this, we don't have to, but I am wondering if people are thinking about moving away from testing as an assessment strategy during this time and instead thinking about other kinds of assessment strategies. I know Bryce Battisti talked about this in his lifeboat strategy session where he shared his microbiology course. And so again, I'm just like, and Tomaso just wrote, what about lowering the impact of summative assessments and upvaluing formative assessment? Tomaso, yes, that's beautiful. Tomaso, I'm so sorry.
That's okay, no
Tomaso, do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Well, I've been flipping my classroom in face-to-face. I guess I'll turn the video on so everybody can see who I am.
And where are you from?
Welcome Community College, chemistry.
Thank you.
So as I've done that, I've just slowly every quarter just chipped away at the value of the tests. And they are less of, I've just moved away from summative assessments and moved way more into formative, more feedback, participatory versions of assessment. And so, you know, just like revisiting our lab curriculum, this might be an opportunity to find ways to add value to formative assessments and make that the rigorous part of the class. And the summative assessment is, you know, I don't know, right? Some people don't take tests well, and there's always going to be an issue with online testing and that kind of stuff. Just some thoughts though.
And I guess if I could just say, you said that really beautifully, and I'm just noticing we have a lot of microbiology faculty and bio faculty who have been teaching online for a long time, and that's their narrative as well. The longer they teach online, the less they rely on high stakes summative assessments like testing.
I would like to share some experience from Lake Washington Technical College. I'm Priyanka Pant.
Hi, Priyanka. I miss you.
So in the winter quarter, some of our biology faculty tried, like we had a mixture of lockdown browser, responders monitoring, like what should we use for assessments. Some of our biology faculty tried open book and timed quizzes from Canvas, and the results were at par what they expected from the class group as an average. So more questions with scenario-based case studies, creative thinking, as well as randomization of questions helped a lot. And it was kind of surprising to see that even with the open book and time restriction, the students had the same average as it was expected the way the class was going. So there are other ways to create deterrence if we continue with the formal assessments we have been using. But after that experience, in spring quarter, we are moving towards what was already shared, you know, assessments like participation, lab work, more of writing assignments than the formal exams as we have. So that is the direction we are moving into too.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I'm looking at some of the other comments that are coming through that aligns with what both of you have shared. Some really good suggestions and ideas. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Jen, I have to mute for just a moment. I'm sorry.
Of course,
can you pick up?
No, you're all good. No worries. So I'm just wondering, just picking up, I'm really enjoying what's happening in the chat. I'm just wondering if there's other things that we haven't discussed, maybe people have typed it into the chat, maybe they haven't, that in the last 6 minutes, what do you feel like you will just die if we don't talk about?
Hey, this is Wendy Lundquist at Green River College.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi. Hey, I would love to hear how it sounds like Carl might have a good explanation for this, how you engage students in group work online in an effective way. I'm a little worried about stressing my students out by adding group work versus facilitating their ability to interact and communicate with each other.
Great question, Wendy. I think Tommaso has his hand up. And again, I'm so sorry that I'm massacring people's names. I will learn them and pronounce them well. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. I just attended a POGO webinar or Zoom meeting last week. I don't know, time has really sort of become very relative right now. And they broke students up into small groups on Canvas. And so then you could have your sort of group work still exist. I thought that was a great idea, and basically took their POGO worksheets and made them asynchronous. And so the only time maybe a synchronous meeting might have to happen within that small group would be for consensus building. And then basically the instructor would just check in on the different discussion threads in the different groups and provide feedback as it was happening. So there were ways to do group work and get some of the same results asynchronously through Canvas groups. And then they can use the collaborate and conference features to meet with each other, which is kind of like a mini Zoom. I guess it uses Big Blue Button or something, which I did use for some of my courses.
I believe it's Carl Bailey. He says that was me running the webinar. Carl, would you like to speak?
There you go, Carl.
Yay, Carl. Go, Carl.
Yeah, hi. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the POGO project did 2 webinar series. I was a panelist in the first one, and then I did an asynchronous one on my own with a moderator. I shared my entire Ken 121 course to the Canvas Commons for people to download and take a look at how my groups are set up, how my actual course is set up using, the common engagement strategies, my exams, my quizzing. It's all there for you. So please go ahead and go to the Canvas Commons link in the chat or email me and I can send it to you. But it's available to everybody at the state board level in Washington State. So again, as Tommaso has said, it's dividing students into the groups using the groups Canvas tool and just monitoring their chats. So again, it can be done on a cell phone. It's all kind of low tech solutions. So anyway.
Carl, do you think when we get this Canvas shell, the Canvas shell is up and ready, do you think you could upload some of those things into the Canvas shell?
I mean, yeah, I can do image files, or, I mean, I don't think people want my whole course imported into that, but.
Oh, no, sorry. I was reading, somebody asked if you have a link to the webinar that people can watch. I'm sorry, that's what I was talking about. My bad.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I can link that in the chat right now.
Yeah, there is some feedback about the cautionary tale about the information that's put up does not last beyond a week. I'm not sure if that's the case, but that was one of the comments that people gave about using that process.
Big Blue Button.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it depends on what if the college has invested in it or not, and the e-learning folks have been discussing this, but if you're using the free version, I think it goes away, but if you're using the paid version, it doesn't. So for folks who want to use the Big Blue Button, maybe that's something to check out with your e-learning director.
Yeah. So,
Carl says he doesn't use it. Never mind. Sorry, Carl.
Okay. I see that there are a few comments that came through around equity and how we are able to make sure technology-wise that some students do not have capacity or resources to participate in the online environment, whether that be with computer or with phone. Clicking a couple of those together. We do have some resources that recently came out, and Jen, I still have to get you this for the microbiology group, around through our WorkSource program. So students that are eligible for those programs, there are some resources that have been pulled together by the team in that division that outline resources that are available to those students, both some that are paid, but that students can be compensated and or that are free to students who are eligible. So I'll make sure that I get that information to Jen and that this group has that available as well.
Thank you. And Jamilyn, just jumping off what you just said, one thing I do want to say to the group, Stephanie Delaney used to be a dean of e-learning, and now she's a VPI at Renton Tech. And she said to me the other day, and I think this is really good advice, is design as low impact as you can. Like, again, Canvas is good for most reasons on a phone, but do a tech survey with your students and find out. Don't assume that the majority of your students don't have access, but then you can work with the students who don't have access. And so I don't think I said that very well, but I hope that makes sense. And it is 12 o'clock, and I think the biggest thing that I need from folks is, do people want to meet again, and when? With the microbiology group, we didn't quite. So I think for me, the biggest anxiety is trying to find a time that works for folks. So is this a good day and time? Like if we just reconvened next week, or I think I could use some help just thinking about this, how to convene folks again, if that makes sense. And I'm seeing folks typing yes into the chat. And I think the biggest thing, yeah, so if we do, yeah, Lori wrote, same time, same chemistry channel.
Yeah. So that's great. I think that it's a resounding yes, and so we can work collaboratively. I'm sure Jen can work to collaborate with all of you. I want to leave out, because I did see several people say this, and we'll close out here, that one of the things that we did not talk about is self-care. And I think that we would be remiss to have this group sign off without making sure that we let you know that at the end of the day, you really need to also take care of yourselves, right? You have a lot, it's not just your students that are impacted, it's not just getting the class online and moving and running forward with that, but making sure that you are pausing, that you're taking inventory of the self and your family and your home and where you are. And taking some time, making sure that you're walking, that you're connecting with others. There's some really wonderful people here that if you don't know them, that you can get to know them. And, just work collaboratively around the subject area, but get to know each other also and develop relationships. Take care of yourselves, be safe, encourage your students to do the same. And at the end of the day, what I think Jen and I want you to know is that from the perspective where we are at the state board, from our seat, we know that you're doing some outstanding work, and we're so very proud of you. And to the extent and the ability that we have, we are here to support you and to help you with the tools and resources that can help you be impactful. So be well, my friends. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks, Jamilyn, and thank you so much for facilitating. That is, it's a hard thing to do when there's so many needs, and so I just wanted to say thank you so much for being willing to facilitate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're a brilliant facilitator, and I also wanted to say thanks to all of you for showing up and for your great feedback. And I will be sending everybody on this list, just some next steps in as minimal an email as possible. All right, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.